Thanks for continuing to watch. And there is still sort of feedback coming through on lots of videos. And yesterday's, when we looked at Kaya Went, somebody contacted me and came up with a wonderful revelation, which, yes, interesting about a certain finding Kaya Went, but we might keep that for another day. So there's a story I wanted to tell you now that I've not told in full ever. And when I mean ever, and sort of this happened in the year 1998. That's the year. I probably talked about it back then, but the actual full story, since then, I blocked it out of my mind. But here's a time for truths. It has it that it's, I think, 1996. I went to Margam, and there was, I think, the site, there was a site ranger there, right? And obviously the manager, whose name I can't remember, I blocked that out. And the ranger there was a chap by the name of Steve George, who I don't really talk to if I ever bump into him in Lantern Major. It's a guy that is, two faces. He talks to you in one vein and then he actually means another, one of those types of people. A chap by the name of Steve George. There's lots of Steve Georges around, but if he ever watches this, just don't like you, mate. You've got two faces. And basically, it's about Margam Park. And I was asked by Steve George to find a Roman road. Now, 1996 is the year that I come out with a book called Romans in the Vale of Glamorgan, my first book, my first published proper book, ISBN number, published book. It's not a bespoke thing. We had I think about 600 printed, and they went pretty well. I think back then it was $6.99. Anyway, he knew I knew I'd come out with this book, and he said about this Roman road at Margam. You got main house and you got the A48. So if you look over from the main house over towards the A48, and it's sort of, there's another keeper's lodge off the A48, and then there's the big wall, and running parallel to the big wall is actually where he believed the Roman road was. Well, good call, because Roman road alignments are usually, if they ever existed in most places, or trackways from pre-Roman times adopted in a Roman period, that type of time, would be running sort of maybe parallel or under existing roads. It makes sense. Now, what type of Roman road he had in mind was probably the Roman road that I sort of had in mind back then. So obviously my thoughts completely changed now. This is 1996. So I thought it was like a Roman road with a camber in the middle, sort of raised, with two ditches either side and a bank to take the drainage, and sort of sand, gravel, and basically a stone surface. That's what he thought. That's what I thought. That's what sort of people thought. Anyway, it came around, and the year is now 1997. So it gets to the summer, and we've got a local archaeology class in Llalliston Inn. And we get a group of people together, really badly equipped we are, But are the thoughts there, and we plan an archaeological excavation. So Steve George says, "Oh, the road's over there." So we started excavating, and what we did, we cut all the turfs in a sort of in a organized manner. We cut the turfs. It was a nice sort of wide trench. Length was good. I think it was something in the region of not 5 meters, long? Probably about 4 meters long, about sort of 2 meters wide, to sort of try and examine this sort of supposed road surface. Yeah, I'll say supposed. I don't think it ever existed there at all, but for some reason Steve wanted us to excavate there. He was, I think he was basically full of it, but he reckoned it was there. Apparently he'd done research and so on. What we should have done is had a little metal rod and just poking the road along the distance. So this is well before I had any qualifications to do with archaeology, which didn't come until about 8 years later with Leicester University with my postgraduate diploma. But I did have an A-level in archaeology, and I had excavated with the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust. I'd excavated with Howard Thomas. I had done lots of other work anyway, and lots of things I've either forgotten or whatever. And anyway, and I think in late 1997, I'd done my first archaeological watching brief, which really went well. It was in a place called, it was in Monmouth anyway. Anyway, I'm muttering. Anyway, get back to this. We were all organised. As I said, we cut the turfs, so it was good. The turf stack looked really good. The edges of the excavation looked really good. So we went down. I think we didn't go down massively deep, and I think I'd put something in a local newspaper saying, people come along and help volunteer. Anyway, we left everything there, and the manager gave us a little sort of room that we could use as an office. It had actually been the old leafleting office, so that was good. So anyway, that was all really good, and the vibes were okay, and we did some surveying work. It was sort of a long day, sort of trial and error, lots of things going on. Anyway, we said to Steve, he said, "Oh, you found anything?" No, we haven't, not yet. So he organised to come the following weekend, right? And I turned up, and there was a group of people who were meant to be on the excavation that day, and they said, "Oh, we're leaving," and this was the following weekend because we're told that the excavation's cancelled, and you can't continue. So I said, "Oh, hang around a bit." Anyway, I went in the building, and Steve met us at the door. He said, "You can't come in the building." And I thought, "Oh, right, why?" He said, "You can't collect any of your stuff either." And I said, "Why?" And it turned out that they'd gone and looked through all our things, and they'd sort of put everything upside down, and I don't know what they thought we'd found, but they went through everything. They went through every single thing in that room. Steve George had sort of, we'd given a room, he'd trespassed on our property, he'd gone through everything. And the manager was basically, I think the manager came down then, and at that time a group of officials wandered out the door, and one of them looked familiar, happened to be from the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust. So in other words, the Glamorgan Grant Archaeological Trust had put a stop on the project. It wasn't scheduled, there was no protection. They'd put a stop on the excavation. They just stopped it. So Steve George was clearly embarrassed that he'd gone through all our things, and certain things had been taken. So hence why I don't like the guy, on the authority of the Margam. And eventually, we did get most of our things back. Most. Anyway. So this was all really odd, and I just said, well, why can't we continue? And they said, you can't. The excavation's cancelled. We actually had a letter of authority from Neath and Port Talbot County Council. I think that's what it was called then. Sure, it was. It was the new councils. So we had a letter of authority from Neath and Port Talbot. You could excavate. You've got our authority. It was the council stamp. You had our authority to excavate. You've got our authority. We just wasn't a conversation with Steve George. It just wasn't a conversation with the manager. I still got the letter somewhere. You've got permission to excavate. It was all above board. Everything was fine. There was nothing scheduled, nothing protected there or whatever. It was all above board. But that day really left a bad feeling. So if you go to Margam House, there's a little door into the sort of, and there was a little ticket office on the right type thing. And there's the little door, you go into sort of the house there and whatever. And there's the manager's office on the right, or it was back then. And we weren't even allowed in. It was absolutely quite shocking. It was unbelievably quite shocking. Even when I went to publish something on this, I wasn't allowed to in Council of British Archaeology, Wales. Years later, even when I'm a member of the IFA and I've got my postgraduate diploma, I'm not even allowed to publish anything on it, which is a bit weird. So I think a couple of weeks go by now, and I contact the authority and I say, look, I want our things back. I want an answer. I want to know what's going on. At that time as well, there was a councillor friend of mine called Keith Davis, who had actually been parliamentary candidate for the Vale of Glamorgan years earlier. Keith Davis, he was there was 3 still SDP members or whatever on the council. So I said, look, we want to continue with the excavation. Why can't we? And he said, yeah, I'm for you. I want you to continue with the excavation. He's a county councillor. So there were lots of emails back and forth, and I said, I want our things back. Anyway, Steve was really sort of, I said, I want to go back out to site to Steve. So he stood there supervising us. I want to see if there's any equipment left on site. So he was there supervising us, right? Also, at that stage, I used to keep my OCD quite hidden, but obviously because this was a really stressful situation, my OCD, and I was looking around. And he said to my wife at the time, he said, oh, how do you put up with this guy, right? Why don't you leave him? This is Steve George now. This is to do with an archaeological excavation. This is a really nasty, evil little weasel, this Steve George. So he's even getting into my wife's head, right? Saying to her, oh, and she's carrying our baby at that time. And he's really evil, nasty guy. And he's basically getting into my wife's head. Why are you with him? He's a bogus archaeologist, he's got OCD, leave him. I was hearing all this whilst I was looking over the site. Anyway, before I could intervene, he just went away. And at that point, we had 2 guards come over. 2 guards to make sure what we're supposed to be taking. It was really strange, very strange. Anyway, we walked back over to the house, which was quite some distance. And we walked back over. And with no assistance from anyone there. And we went into where our stuff was, and there was stuff thrown everywhere. They had trashed we had some records there. They had trashed it all. There was stuff ripped up. There was equipment damaged. It was an atrocious state. And all the other stuff was piled in public view where anyone could take anything, right? This is the mentality of what we had to put up with. We were made to feel ashamed, dirty. This is Neath and Port Talbot County Council. I don't know what was in their minds. And then we had the a message from Keith Davis, the councillor at Neath and Port Talbot. He said, we had a meeting, we had a vote, and we narrowly lost the vote. You can't continue with the excavations. And basically I said, why? He said, the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust have blocked it, and they have got the ear of the director of the department. I think it was Parks. He's personal friends with the director of the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust at that time was Gareth Dowdall, and basically they had right. Basically, the facts were we had full permission from the council. Right, it wasn't a scheduled protected ancient monument. There were two people on a group. There was a qualified historian, and I think somebody else had an archaeological qualifications, and you know, I had years of experience, and this is what happened. It's all because of the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust. Up until that point, you know, the manager, the manager was really wanted us to excavate everywhere, right? Unfortunately, that wasn't to be. So, 1 second, I've got to get the phone. Bear with me. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this recording now. And yeah, that's basically everything. So we had permission to excavate. There was a meeting and all the rest of it. And then basically the excavation was completely stopped by these people. And why? You know, we didn't find anything. There was nothing there. There was actually no road surface. So shenanigans, evils in archaeology. I think that's enough for today. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share these videos to get the news out there. How corrupt and twisted archaeology is. More tomorrow. Bye.